Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. We broadcast 2 hours Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. Just please stay on topic. Call in number 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen lines up and running. 605-477-3249. Jason's engineering the broadcast. Thank you, Jason. Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
I'm going to throw you off. One of these days, I'm going to throw you off, and I'm just going to start talking. Maybe I'll start singing 1970s disco songs.
Well, since you mentioned cars. I've got a short story I'd like to share with you, and I think you might find it interesting. So, many years ago, about 30 years ago, I bought a torque wrench, and it's used to tighten the lug nuts properly on wheels. And I knew this, and actually, if you read the manuals, they will tell you, don't use impact tools, impact guns, impact wrenches, air-powered, to tighten the lug nuts because you can bend the wheels. Well, I know that, and I knew that for a long time. So I bought a torque wrench, and its brand was Proto, P-R-O-T-O. It's professional quality. And most Proto tools have a lifetime warranty, as most Craftsman brand have a lifetime warranty. At least they did when they were made in USA. Well, the wrench started slipping. It's a ratchet torque wrench, and you apply downward pressure, maybe 100 pounds, 120 pounds downward, and the ratchet would slip. So I called Proto up, and I said, so I've got one of your tools, and it's a torque wrench, and it slips. And they said, well, it's only guaranteed for 2 years. Now, we're talking about a tool that's darn close to $200. They only warranty it for 2 years, and they said, well, and the calibration of it's only guaranteed for 90 days, 3 months. And they weren't very nice on the phone. It's one of these middle-aged gals. And I don't know what it is about some of these middle-aged gals, but boy, oh boy, they're so, whenever I hear their voice, I know I'm going to have a tough time. And it's almost universal. So I remembered that, and I put the wrench back in the drawer. And about that time, I was racing a Lotus Europa, 1974 Lotus Europa on the track. And I needed a tool because I wanted to modify the rear suspension. And there's an adjustment on some vehicles, not on the Lotus, today, and you can adjust what's called the camber, and that's the tilting in or the tilting out of the wheels. If you look down from above the vehicle, they either tilt out at the bottom or they tilt in at the bottom. Well, I wanted to make them adjustable. And there was no adjustment. So I decided to cut the rear links and add fine-threaded 5/8 bolts and make mine adjustable. But to keep making adjustments, to test it, to find out what was the best setting, I needed a specific punch, and I bought it, a machinist punch. I bought it at Sears, a Craftsman, lifetime guarantee. And I'd like to talk about a few different companies and how they handle their customers. So I already mentioned that Proto was off my list. I wasn't going to deal with them. They're miserable to deal with. At least they were to me. And these are all my opinions. So recently, I broke that Craftsman punch. Now, I've had it since the 70s, but it's a lifetime guarantee Craftsman. It broke, and I went to Sears, and it has a lifetime guarantee, except they no longer make that particular product. They have an imported one that's half the weight, it's thinner, it's cheesier, and I don't want it. I'd rather have my broken one than the new one. So I said, after a half hour with the gal at Sears trying to find, the salesperson trying to find that replacement, there is no such replacement. They don't make it anymore. The best I can get is to pay twice as much on eBay and buy one used from the 1970s. That's as close as I can get to having one that's, that's not broken. Okay, so I'd have to buy a new one. So Sears, their warranty isn't worth too much to me. All right. Then to replace that ratchet that slipped, I bought one, did some research on the internet, and there was a brand called Tekton, Tekton. And they had one that would measure accurately up to 250 foot-pounds. Twice the amount of the Proto that I had. And it was $57. So I bought it on the internet, I got it, used it a few times, and it slipped. So I went on the internet, and I called the company, and they answered within 2 rings. I talked to a gentleman there, he answered within two rings. His name is Dave. And I said, here's the problem. He said, well, go to the website, take a picture of it, drop the picture in the box, fill out where you want us to ship the new one, and we'll ship you another one. We'll ship you a replacement. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Didn't ask for a receipt, didn't say how long have you had it, didn't make me prove it was mine, just wanted a picture of it. Well, I went to the website, got a picture of it, put it on my computer, sent the picture to him, and then I thought I'd call him because I was so impressed with how they handled this. I called him to say thank you. And while I was saying thank you to Dave, the same guy that I talked to on the phone the first time, minutes before, while I was saying thank you, he said we already shipped it. That's Tekton, Tekton. I am so impressed with that company that if they want me to evaluate their tools and have them on the air, I will do it. Absolutely. And then I called Mercedes-Benz. I have in my hands a Mercedes-Benz special tool. It's made by Mercedes-Benz. It came in a Mercedes-Benz bag. It's about $35. And what it is for the emergency removal, lowering of a convertible top on a Mercedes-Benz SL. That's their 2-seater sports car. So I bought this wrench. It was $35. I bought it on the internet. And I have the wrench in my hands, and it's broken. The one side is Allen, the other 8mm Allen, the other side is 10mm flat wrench. It's a specially designed wrench to remove the top. You have to have this wrench. You can't do it without. So I thought, you know what? I looked at this with a magnifying glass, and the metallurgy is flawed. So I called Mercedes. I was on hold for 15 minutes, listening every 15 seconds to the message saying they appreciate my call. This is Mercedes headquarters. This isn't a dealer. This is headquarters. And I finally get this gal, and she wants the VIN number. And I said, no. I just have a wrench that's broken. We're not going to do that. We're not going to get into which car this is for. It doesn't matter which car it's for. I have the bag. It's a Mercedes tool. It's stamped Mercedes. The label on it says Mercedes Original. It's got the part number on the tool. I just want to know how I'm going to get a new one, a replacement. So she couldn't do anything for me without the vehicle identification number. It has nothing to do with the vehicle. So I asked for a supervisor. I get the manager. And after talking to the manager, I said, I'm really surprised. I thought you were going to say, Mr. Finelli, I am so sorry that you're having this problem. Would it be okay if we sent you a replacement? I said, but you haven't said that. And I said that to him, 3 or 4 times. And the best he could do was put me in touch with the dealer. I said, I'm not going to a dealer. I can't stand the Mercedes dealer in Springfield, Missouri. They don't know what they're doing. And I told him that, in my opinion, the only difference between that Mercedes dealer and Jesse James is the gun. They're horrible to deal with. They don't know what they're doing. Even the salesperson doesn't know what he's doing, at least the guy I talked to. So I said, I really thought that you were going to help me, but you haven't been any help. I actually thought maybe you would say, would it be okay if we took care of this for you and we interceded on your behalf, called someone, the dealer maybe, and made this happen for you, but you didn't do that. Finally, he agreed that he would do that. And I said, do you know how long we've been on the phone? He said, about 20 minutes or 15 minutes. I said, no, it's been 45 minutes. So 45 minutes on the phone, and I have no resolution yet, except I did get an email thanking me, and it was such a pleasure to talk with me. It was not a pleasure to talk with me, because when that guy was done, he was reamed for not helping me. Now, I didn't yell and scream, but I was very firm with him. Now, I didn't have to be firm with Tekton because they took care of me. Now, so we talked about Sears, how miserable it is to work with them because they don't support the products that they used to make that had a lifetime guarantee. Let's go to Harbor Freight. So Harbor Freight you can buy for $6.99 a 3/8-inch drive wobble ratchet extension set. The whole set. Full price is probably $10. We've broken a couple of those. And all you do is you walk into the store and you say to them, this broke, and they go, okay, we'll give you a new one. It's as simple as that. And how much is their lifetime guarantee torque wrench? Now, it's not as good as the Tekton, but theirs is only $19.99 compared to like $150, $170 for the Proto brand. So what I'm saying is, I mentioned this to the Mercedes management when I was on the phone. I said, when I deal with John Deere corporate or Mercedes-Benz corporate, I really expect that you're going to take care of your customers, but you don't. You don't. So other companies like Harbor Freight, they actually replace defective products or broken products under the warranty that they claim that you have. They actually do what they say. Tekton, it doesn't get any better than Tekton. Honestly, I am so impressed with Tekton that I've spent about the first segment talking about how good they are. Mercedes-Benz, I am not impressed. I would never buy a brand new Mercedes-Benz. Never. Because they're miserable to work with. Corporate, my experience, and the local dealer. Rich Scheben, any thoughts?
Well, when you deal with Mercedes or any company that has that had a good name, I'll use an analogy. It's like an NFL football player. Player's old, he's in his 30s, and we're going to make the exception for Tom Brady. And they're not performing like they once did, but they have the name. But instead of having them forcefully be retired through attrition or lack of performance, one more team picks them up. And they're picking them up because of their name. So with this tea time, what I would do is I would find out if they knew who you were, if they knew if you were a radio broadcaster, and if they didn't, I would tell them to take the information that you're mentioning today on audio and publicize this as unpaid and well-deserving by performance advertising. Start a whole new industry. There you go.
Well, it's an endorsement. It's an endorsement of Tekton. We'll be right back. Rich Scheben with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, I'd like to read two very short emails. The first one is from Mercedes-Benz as a result of my call to them yesterday. Here it is, quote, Dear Mr. Finelli, thank you for calling the Customer Assistance Center. It was a pleasure talking to you earlier. As we discussed in our conversation, I have forwarded your request to the part manager at Frank Fletcher Imports for further review. Should you need to contact us via email in the future, please visit the www.mbusa.com Contact Us page. Best regards, Adam, Mercedes-Benz USA LLC, and a phone number. So what he said was that he forwarded my information for further review. We have no settlement here. Nothing. I have not been contacted by the dealership that he sent the information to. All he did was tell me that he forwarded my request to the part manager. I think he means the parts manager. Okay. Now here's a response from Tekton. And it says, your Tekton support case with the case number. And it says, hey, Vincent, I appreciate the call. I have your new wrench on the way. Dave, the Tool Solutions Manager, and his phone number. Now, one of those replies actually took care of business. That would be Tekton. The Mercedes, which was a less expensive part, I'm still hanging. Still hanging. So let me just tell one other little short story about Mercedes. So there was a S600 here at the farm. S600 is a V12, 12-cylinder Mercedes, top-of-the-line sedan. 2 turbochargers, their flagship car. The best, most expensive Mercedes they made that year. Happened to be 2005. And it shimmied down the road. So I found out that it had 4 bent wheels. 4 bent aluminum magnesium alloy wheels. I found out that the previous owner drove it over the railroad tracks and the wheels bent. Okay. I can't fix that. So I called Mercedes corporate headquarters, and after many phone calls, they finally said, okay, we'll send you 1. I said, it's got 4 wheels. We're only going to send you 1. And we want the bad one, of which there are 4. They wanted 1 of them back at the dealership. That's Mercedes. They should say, oh my gosh, are you kidding? Driving over the railroad tracks would bend $2,000 worth of wheels? Nope. Nope. Now, Mercedes is interested in you for a really short time. That's until the ink just begins to dry on the check in the contract. That's when they're interested in you, in my opinion. So I really think that, well, Mercedes-Benz and John Deere I think they must go to lunch together. But Tekton, now that's something else. Those guys are impressive beyond belief. So what am I going to do if I want to buy tools? The first place I'm going to look is to see if Tekton sells the tools that I want. The prices are great. The warranty can't be beaten. How do you beat that? In this class, I'm not being paid for this. This is not a commercial. I am so impressed, I'm endorsing this company. And I'm going to see if I can get Tekton to come on the air with me. Tekton. I suggest you check him out. You can buy it on Amazon. So, Rich, that's how I feel about companies today. Sears has lost their way. And their lunch has been eaten by Harbor Freight and companies like Tekton and in the tool line. And they deserve to have their lunch eaten because they have lost their way.
Well, what I would do, Vince, is just in case somebody from Tekton is not listening today, I would call up their sales/PR department or talk to some executive, tell them who you are, tell them the great service you got, and tell them to go on GCNlive.com and listen to this broadcast, or at least the first 15, 20 minutes of it, or half an hour of it, and have them use that free of charge as advertising.
Well, they're certainly welcome to do that. There's no charge. If they want to use it, they're welcome to. They've got my permission right here, right now. Rich Scheben and I will be right back after these bottom of the hour news and commercial announcements. Rich Scheben's with us in class. Our engineers are running around really, really busy. So if you happen to be calling in, just let that phone ring and they will get to you. They've got multiple studios that they're racing back and forth among. And I just wanted to mention that when I called Tekton and I mentioned that I couldn't believe the second call to Tekton to say thank you, the one where he said, oh yeah, we've shipped it already to you. I couldn't believe it. I said, but so you believe me? You believe just because I sent you a picture and I filled out this little box that said, here's what happened to it, and it's stripped. You believe that? And they said, we're not going to let a few bad apples ruin it for our customers. We're not going to let a few bad apples ruin it for our customers. Is that impressive or what? So, but I did get the word, and I want to know a little bit more about that. And it was, well, some guys will take a picture of of a screen on the computer, and they'll say, that's my torque wrench. And they just got an image off the internet. Well, and they can tell. I mean, they can tell, and that guy's not going to get a replacement because he never had the torque wrench to begin with. But they know that they can tell. They can tell who is telling the truth and who's not. And the ones who are telling the truth get incredible service. So there you have it. Margaret in Spain, the country of Spain. Welcome. You're on with me and Rich Scheben.
Well, hello. Thank you.
Well, thanks
How are
for
we doing today? I hear you're
really
busy.
well. How can we help you?
I'm calling because y'all almost killed me the other day talking about tomato sauce.
Why?
Because you destroyed the tomatoes, my friend.
Well, wait a minute. All right. So I, for the very first time, I took tomatoes out of our garden.
I heard the story about your beautiful wife grew and invested so much time in growing.
So what did we do wrong?
Had a lovely harvest, and then all hell broke loose in the kitchen.
All right. So what? Okay. So they let me loose with a knife in the kitchen, some tomatoes, and bright light. So what went wrong? I was there. What went wrong?
Okay, my friend, listen. I'm from New Orleans. Tomato sauce or tomato gravy or with a spaghetti sauce or whatever you want to call it is one of the easiest things to make. I'm not joking when I'm telling you how sad I was to hear the story. And then with Guineith talking about making it into tomato juice, I'm like, gee whiz, nobody knows how to make tomato sauce, so let me just tell you real quick.
So you're calling all the way from across the ocean to tell us. I think that's great.
Yeah, because it's so important. And for anybody who's a prepper or who's trying to grow their own food and then they destroy it in the processing, it's like, do y'all want me to come over there and teach you how to cook?
Well, next time you're in the neighborhood, please do. But it's going to be like a 10,000-mile trip for you.
Well, I'm going on New Orleans in November. I'll be there for a few weeks. I used to live in St. Louis. I know the story.
Okay.
I've heard y'all are up to number 1 in murders, so that's interesting. But
yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah, working on it.
We've got rough competition. There's Chicago.
Well, you got East St. Louis now. Don't come here talking. I mean, East St. Louis, your biggest competition.
Okay, so what do I do with these tomatoes? I've got them washed.
Okay.
Now, what's the next step?
First of all, you've washed them too many times, okay, unless you're putting pesticides on them.
No.
And anyway, you're probably going to want the skin off, which I don't even do that because I'm an old-fashioned cook. But anyway, you've got your tomatoes on the counter. You can wash them, but you don't have to because you're going to dip them for about a minute and a half into what we call scalding water. That would be just below boiling. You put them in for a minute and a half, and then you take them out, and that's going to make the peels naturally come off, okay? You're going to have to help them a little bit, but you don't have to be there peeling a tomato, which is a really hard thing to do. Now, you've got your tomatoes scalded and peeled. You want to cut them in half. This is how I do it. Cut them in half, and then gently with a spoon, take out the little sections with the majority of seeds. Unless you happen to love the seeds, which I do, and I leave it all in. So, I'm telling you, scald them to take off the peel, cut them in half, gently scoop out those inner sections with the seeds. The story you told, you took out all the pulp. The pulp, and then you ran it through a strainer.
I didn't. No, I did not take out the pulp. No,
you said you ran it through a strainer, and the pulp went through.
Well, the strainer had openings like 1/4 of an inch. The size of us. Okay.
Too big. So this is. I'll just say what I do, and then you see if it makes sense. So I would gently take out those little sections of tomatoes. I would not run it through a strainer because I don't care if there's a little extra seed in there or whatever. Scald them. Take the peeling off. Scoop out the seeds. Now, throw that all in the pot. And now you start cooking it down. And you just cook it down and cook it down and cook it down. In fact, yesterday a friend of mine from New Orleans sent me a picture, coincidentally, of her mama's tomato gravy. And we do it there in a heavy, old-fashioned cast iron pot. It's the best pot for cooking. But if you don't have that, you want a nice, heavy pot, and you just slowly cook down those tomatoes. What I heard you say is that you washed them about 75 times, then you put them through a strainer, which the holes were too big. You lost the pulp, you eliminated the seeds, and then you ended up with tomato juice, which is what you'll end up with because you've taken out the substance of the tomato.
Margaret, I want to thank you for sharing this, and I'm very serious about this. I consider this constructive criticism, and I was trying to figure out exactly what went wrong. And now you've explained it to me, but I didn't wash them 75 times, but I did wash them like 4, 5, 6 times because they had mud on them. They had mud
because throw them in a bowl of water and let the mud get off.
Well, that's what I did.
Understand, and look, 75 was a slight exaggeration, I know.
Yeah, by about...
I'm a little funny, okay?
15 times.
You just want to get that dirt off. You don't even need to peel out all the slightly yellowed parts or whatever. When you're in Europe, people don't have beautiful-looking vegetables to put in the pot. They go to the States and go, man, how did we get them all to look so pretty? But anyway, skin off by scalding. Seeds out that you don't think you want. All in the pot, let it cook slowly.
Now, how long?
Cook,
covered,
hours.
uncovered?
Hours.
Covered or uncovered?
I vary with covering and uncovering. If it's too juicy, too liquidy, I uncover it.
What about
there
a
will
crock
be more
pot?
evaporation.
What about a cylindrical crock pot?
That's fine.
Okay.
And again,
Rich, even,
go ahead.
Rich, even what do you think? You've made spaghetti sauce.
Well, sure. I think she's right on. That's exactly what we do. We scald the skins off. But see, we do something a little different, Margaret, because we live off grid, so we don't have a freezer. So we can everything. So the cooking part of it that you're talking about is a step that we actually skip, because when you can something, you're actually cooking it. So we're killing two birds with one stone regarding the storage of it, but at the same time, we're cooking it. You understand?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of tomatoes?
And I would probably want more cooking done on my sauce than I would get if I were preserving with heat.
What kind of tomatoes?
I do that myself, too. But before I'd even preserve it or put it in the jar to be preserved, I would cook it down to a nice texture that I want.
What kind of tomatoes?
Because you also have to, in my case, you're going to add your garlic, your celery, your shallots or onions, possibly some parsley. Go ahead and season it with those delicious vegetables and herbs that were, I bet, in the sauces that you were talking so wonderfully about. So, there's about 5 ways to make sauce, but I just heard you doing way too much work and ending up with way too little product because you had lost half of it in the processing. And it just broke my heart. Let me just sum it up this way. I didn't feel like y'all loved your tomatoes. Love those tomatoes.
I've got about 15 pounds on the counter right now, and I can do it your way, and I will.
Right.
And you've taught a really neat class this morning. Are you an expert in preparing foods for long-term storage?
Yes, and I have been a private chef, and both of my grandmas and mama and grandpa were excellent cooks from New Orleans. But I do preserving, conserving, drying, and eating right out of the pot. So, it just broke my heart on how much you lost.
Well, that's just once, okay? And we've said anyone who hasn't had a total failure in their garden 3 years in a row has a green thumb. And the purpose of sharing that was it's nowhere near as easy as people might think. Nowhere near. Now, the second time, now it's going to be really easy. But the first time, it was pretty frustrating.
I know. I understand. I don't know how to do everything either. I just happen to be raised in, cooking country. And,
right.
God, there's nothing better than a rich, slow-cooked tomato gravy tomato sauce.
So, Margaret, can you come on the air?
Pardon me?
Can you come on the air with us and teach us cooking?
Love to.
Okay, you've got my email address, right?
I used to. I called about a year ago because I'm also this PhD in interpersonal communication, and you were talking about you had a bad person in your audience who wouldn't shut up, and I called in to make a little suggestion about what to do. So I said all of that to say I think your numbers have changed, and maybe I've lost your email. It was more than a year ago. Mm-hmm. So if you'll tell it to me or give me to somebody who can tell it to me or whatever, I'll be glad to email you.
I'll tell you what, leave your email address with our engineer. So at the end of this, just stay on and give him your email address. He will give it to me, and I will contact you. Okay.
Because I just want to emphasize this part. Love the food. Love it. I just didn't hear the love.
Well, it was there. It was there. It really was. It was very frustrating because I looked on the internet, I looked at recipes, and it did not say what you said. It did not.
Okay. Well, I'm happy that you answered my call. I'm delighted to explain what I know, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you, Margaret. Just stay with us, and I'm going to put you on hold, and you can tell our engineer, okay?
Thanks, Vincent. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, Rick.
Bye, Margaret. Hey, Vince, just so you know, if you ever do a taste testing contest, I'm an official registered certified food taster. And here, heck, our tomatoes barely make it to the jars because we're always eating our tomatoes right off the garden in a tomato sandwich fashion. Love tomato sandwiches.
I do the same thing with peppers and a wrap. Rich Stevens with us. OffGridMontana.com. Rich, what's on your list?
Oh, I got a lot of stuff on my list, Vince. First of all, I want to talk about some of the political correct stuff that's been going on because we have a very short segment here before the hard break. But things like Trump body count, how they're demonizing not just President Trump, but basically everybody who sticks up for the little people, everybody who sticks up for truth, who sticks up for principle, who sticks up for the United States of America. And we talked privately yesterday, and you mentioned to me that you wanted me to mention some of the things that I'm hearing with my contacts. And it won't come as any surprise, but the powers that be, what do you call it, the deep state, the establishment, I've made it very clear, and I've been saying this for years, and I've given hundreds of examples, that all the divide and conquer strategies that's being used, it's not for the purpose of these politically correct buzzwords like equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, prosperity for the people, all this stuff. Pardon me, they're all BS, politically correct buzzwords hijacked by definition to use as a pot-stirring technique to divide the American people by every group imaginable. Race, skin pigmentation, sexual orientation, gender, religion, you name it, they're going after it. They're just trying to divide and distract as much as possible. So one of the reasons they're looking at the Trump tax returns is basically, and they're doing this technique for everything. It's not that they're trying to find that Donald Trump did something illegal. Odds are he had a CPA do it in the first place. However, what they're trying to do, and they're doing this to ordinary people right now, is they're looking at for example, Donald Trump's database of people and businesses that he was doing commerce with. So what they're doing is they're buying people off, they're blackmailing people to say derogatory things about Trump. So they're separating the target with political correctness, hate, and division tactics. And they're doing this with regular people. They're doing this if you have a Facebook account, if you have a Twitter account, a link, anything. The powers that be can see who are in your circle, good or bad. So what they're doing is they're taking information about certain people, again, if they're pro-America, if they're pro-capitalism, if they're pro-rule of law, if they're pro-hard work, effort, proven results, and qualification, if they're pro-freedom, prosperity, liberty, they're going after all of us. And what they're doing is they're especially they're using people as a host, especially people who don't read and research. And then they're saying, well, Donald Trump did this, he did that, and they did that. Plus it distracts from all of the people on the left who did pedophilia, who laundered money, who just like the banks who have rigged all the markets and never spent a day in jail for rigging the Forex, the silver, the treasuries, the LIBOR. Basically, I think people realize that it's a lot less left-right paradigm and a lot more aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. So this is the strategy that's going to be amped up tenfold. So if you're noticing people not talking to each other as much, if you're noticing people angry with other people, if you're noticing the powers that be ramping up skin pigmentation versus skin pigmentation, this gender versus that gender, this religion versus that religion, they are going to ramp it up because their job is to sway public opinion and hold on to the narrative. But they're just not manufacturing perception, pity, guilt, and ideology. They're also targeting family. They're targeting friends. They're targeting politics. They're targeting the alternative/new media. They are targeting everybody. Right now, they don't even care who hates anybody. They're just going for every group out there possible. And if you read, and I've mentioned this a million times, I'm blue in the face. If you read Marx and Alinsky, the Frankfurt School, Cloud and Piven techniques, the Communist Manifesto, it shows how the powers that be are setting stage for government interventions, for austerity, for confiscation and redistribution of wealth. And they're using group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, as their number one tool. And we are all going to have a loss of individual rights because of this. So we have to be absolutely aware that they are using these techniques. It's going to get a lot worse. And, I think Donald Trump is going to do some good things if he gets reelected. He's just got to get rid of the bad people around him who are bought and paid for. And after the break, Vince, I want to talk about some of the things that Donald Trump has just done.
Okay. Rich Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. And if you'd like to find his book, it's on Amazon.com, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. And you can see images, you can see his cabin, you can see his solar array, you can see his power generation little building there. It's all right there. His lifestyle. You may want to check it out. You may want to duplicate it. Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, you were talking about President Donald Trump and some of the things he's done. Please continue.
During one of the breaks, they were talking about the news, which I'm sure most of this audience already knows, has read, is that President Trump is ending the welfare-dependent immigration, saving taxpayers billions of dollars. Now, this is a really good start, and this, again, has nothing to do with skin pigmentation, has nothing to do what sexual orientation or what gender or what religion somebody is. It's the fact that 80% of the people are broke. This is why I talk about economic 101 stuff. This is why I dovetail them with social, political, and economic and financial rationale, is because when you connect it, it makes sense. For example, here's another article right next that I saved. Illegal alien accused of killing Molly Tibbetts. Illegal alien claims constitutional rights violated. Illegal aliens do not have constitutional rights. And I just want to bring a little flashback from President Obama that he said crime and poverty are not qualifiers for asylum. Now, President Trump, if we've talked about this on this show so many times, but if you don't declassify all the things that you said you would and the things that we asked for, not just the FISA, not just the names on the pedophiles with Epstein Island, the pedophile island, but all the other things that we've requested over the past several months, basically the United States is going to be in jeopardy of losing our humanity, our rule of law, our democracy, and our republic. Now, I'm going to, Vince, if it's okay, dovetail into economics to show mostly how broke the people are. Here is an article. It's we discussed this the other day: old versus young, urban versus rural, home buyers versus sellers. And here's a summary here. I'm just going to mention a few things out of the summary. The quantity of new potential home buyers is decelerating to a trickle. Another point: the quantity of potential sellers is surging. And this is one of the big reasons is because of urban suburban America. 90% of people live in urban suburban America. Well, taxes and insurance has gotten so high in urban suburban America, people aren't looking at building equity as a tool of retirement or creating wealth anymore. So, next summary point: this mismatch will continue to drive the Federal Reserve to cut the federal funds rate and resultant mortgage rates to record lows. Now, they talk about 65-year-olds having the highest home ownership rate, and of course, older people are going to have more of their equities out of debt, even though 78% of the folks 65 and older don't even own their homes outright. Or, pardon me, 78% do own their homes outright. But they talked about how rural areas and urban suburban areas are different. Well, for young people who are moving to urban suburban areas, you're making it tougher on yourself because, just like Vince just said, I'm not saying that everybody needs to live off-grid. I'm not saying everybody needs to live rural. I'm not saying everybody needs to do anything. I'm just saying that there's a definite there's a perspective out there that people think that in our economy, going urban or suburban is going to give them better opportunities. But when you look at the cost shifting, when you look at the cost in general, when you look at the debt loads, when you look at the crime, you have to start thinking outside the box. You know, millennials, I read all the time how they brag about their technology skill, but yet they don't want to live off-grid, which is a solar array is technology. You know, in Montana is the #1 state for telecommuting. I'm not telling you to move to Montana. I'm telling you to move where your interests and hobbies are. I'm going to go through a few articles right now that are relevant to the context of my message, and that is, could a debt jubilee really work? Well, I don't know how a debt jubilee is really going to work because of the fact that it's just going to reward all the malinvestment done by the elite. Okay? It's going to basically, if we give a jubilee, the super wealthy, the super people with the highest net worths are going to get most of their debts forgiven, and it's not going to really help the little people in ratio. Now, going back to one last thing I wanted to mention about the illegal immigration thing, you know, you have the Democrats talking about free health care. I want to remind everyone about the millions of Americans who went through medical bankruptcy. Now, if we, and that's why the opposition wants things like red flag laws. They want to avoid due process. And when you really connect the dots, everything is being done for the aristocracy to maintain and manage the people, to maintain control of the money and the people. Now, I want to mention a few articles here. Entire Swiss curve goes sub-zero. Global negative yield debt spikes to record high. Next article. Easy money extreme. Some Swiss banks pay their clients to borrow. Next article. Entire German curve drops below zero for the first time ever. Next article. Mortgage rates drop to zero in Denmark. Borrow money for free. Next article. This is about the U.S. Bankruptcy filings rising. So we have bankruptcy, delinquencies, defaults going through the roof in America. And it's pretty obvious, and I've talked about this so many times, we can't raise the rates. When 80% of people are living paycheck to paycheck, we can't raise rates in America because everything is going to crash. Stocks, bonds, housing, retail and commercial, done. We can't even afford to pay the interest on our debt as things stand here. Just revenues through taxes. We're not even paying 100% of our debt. Okay, and I'm not even talking about principal. So what do we do? I'm not saying negative interest rates are the perfect answer. I'm saying if we're going there, because if you look at Europe, you look at Japan, everybody's heading towards negative interest rates, okay? Now, I'm not saying we can't have limitations like means testing and extending the mortgages out and all the things that I've talked about. But we need to protect the little people, because if 80% of people live in paycheck to paycheck, we have to limit debt. Debt is a huge, huge problem in America. And, I'm reading about all these business models in corporate America. They're not little guy friendly. All these companies are merging in order to get bigger. Big tech, banking, even gold companies, food companies, hedge funds. I'm reading about people who are thinking about starting a hedge fund or certain companies so the American people, aka the government, can bail them out. I'm reading about all these people refinancing their house so they can get cash out refinancing, which is up to like 40%. And they're not refinancing for home improvement, which was home equity loans were designed to do. They're using their household as an ATM. And they're just saying, well, things are not going to get better, so we might as well have a good time now. And they're buying autos that they can't afford. They're going on vacation. They're buying wants and not needs. And the shadow banks, like the Quicken Loans of the world, are basically selling this equity to the people because they think the people are eventually going to default, and the shadow banks are going to get their home for pennies on the dollar, which, if they keep doing that, is going to happen. So what this ATM shadow banking industry is doing is creating households and families in the zombie category. We already have $14 trillion of debt. And, people are saying, well, we only have 2% economic growth. That's one of the reasons why we can't increase our interest rates. When you look at the fact that 55% approximately, it depends on who you read, of the population, 25 to 54-year-olds, that's the main working population, 25 to 54-year-olds, only 55% of that population is working. And that's even if you include part-time and the gig economy. So we have to start thinking differently, because you look at the S&P 500 and the large cap stocks. I have an article right here that talks about small cap stocks are badly lagging the S&P. Should we be worried? Well, we should be worried, because large cap stocks are only up because of stock buybacks. I've read at some companies up to 80%. That's record stock buybacks this year and last year. So that's not a business model. Okay, we've talked about how this is basically welfare for the rich, money out of thin air for QE, fractional reserve lending, stock buybacks. We've talked about this in great detail. So the small companies who can't compete against these big corporate oligarchies in a fascist system that Donald Trump inherited, what are they going to do? They can't afford to get the opportunities with all the tax write-offs and the lobbyists and the special interests. And this is why the small caps and the emerging markets are not doing well, because we've created a system where the big guys are protected and the big guys are merging, and they're not doing things in a, and this is worldwide, by the way, but they're not doing things in a legitimate business-like manner. And when you look at look around the world, you know, China, 3 banks in China just went down and got nationalized. Again, Japan and Europe they have so many negative bonds, and the U.S. Treasury is looking good because we're lagging behind in that, and the big money is coming to the U.S., and they're seeking safety right now, and that's why they're buying U.S. Treasuries, which is good for us. But the economic climate change, well, when you look at the economy in general, okay, you look at taxes, you look at sciences for sale, you look at the climate change issues, everything in every category is fixed, it's rigged, it's lies, propaganda, false flags, and hoaxes. Everything is about the powers that be. They start with a final conclusion of what we, the people, should believe and how we should act and what we should say and not say. Then they manufacture the narrative, and they buy and blackmail the people off. And these young people are not going to be saved by some app. So, Vince, I'm going to finish this after the break, if you don't mind, and put a few things in perspective.
Very good. Rich Scheben, offgridmontana.com. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. You can get his book on Amazon.com, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana, on Amazon. Rich, please continue. We've got Margaret on hold, so I'm going to put her on as soon as you're done tying these points together.
Yeah, well, listen, I just want to touch on, before I continue what I was saying, I know I've mentioned negative interest rates only because if we're going to go there, and I've been saying this, Vince, we've been talking about this for years, privately and publicly, and as you know, that, you know, it looked like we were heading there, and we've discussed this. And I'm just saying, if we're going to go to a negative interest rate, now, is it good for savers? Heck no. But if 80% of the public is in debt up to their eyeballs, and bankruptcies and defaults and delinquencies are shooting through the roof, if we can save a good portion of those people, and then if it goes into negative interest rates, keep in mind, even if the long end, let's say the 30-year bond goes to zero, okay, and they say, well, we're going to take the 10-year and make that the new 30-year regarding home mortgages. So people can take their time and pay back their mortgage with more time, okay? Let's just say, I'm shooting from the hip, because nothing makes sense. I guarantee you nobody in their economic book read about quantitative easing and Operation Twist and fractional reserve lending, which used to be 10 to 1. Who the heck knows what it is now? How about stock buybacks? Was that in your economic books? That used to be illegal. So everything is we're in uncharted territory. I'm just saying, even if we go to zero, a person's mortgage is still going to be 2% because of the fact that there's going to be fees, there's going to be points, there's going to be this, there's going to be all of this stuff that the bank or the lender is going to charge. So if we go deep into negatives, which is very possible from what I'm reading, and when you see what's happening in Japan and Europe, you know, the corrupt monetary policies from the central banks, Keynesian economics, group identity politics, and, of course, demographics. Young people aren't having kids, and more importantly, the older people are retiring, the World War II generation. I even know Generation Xers who are now retiring. So when you look at demographics in general, old people or people, The peak spending years is between 45 and 47 in America. So that being said, as we have 10,000 people per week going into their 60s and retirement age, we're not going to have the spending because of demographics. So that being said, we have to read between the lines because the powers that be are finding it at this point in time in history. They're finding it way easier to manipulate the people than inform them. And they're literally picking winners and losers. Let me just give you an example of some creative accounting. And it's not even that creative, but just to show you what's happening here. Like when you look at Apple trading around $200, it's almost double the value of trading that it was in 2015. But yet Apple earnings were about the same value, approximately $53 billion, as they are today. So investors are paying almost double the share price for a company that hasn't grown earnings in 4 years. So we have to remember that when it comes to purchasing and consuming, okay, the U.S., with their unit of measures and calculations like GDP, we rely on 70% consumption for so-called GDP growth. And as you know, I feel that's an illegitimate measure. I think all of our measures right now, because of what we're doing and our debt situation, is illegitimate for happiness for the bottom 93% of people. But right now, people are so broke that they're buying payments. They're not buying autos. They're not buying houses. They're buying payments. So we have to rely on 70% consumption for so-called growth, and if 80% of the consumers are living paycheck to paycheck, what do we do? This is why maybe I overdo talking about interest rates, but interest rates are a function of economic growth, wages, and inflation. Now, wages have upticked a little bit lately, not much. Economic growth is mostly creative accounting, and inflation, we've basically imported deflation and exported inflation. And the inflation we have, which is still relevant, is because of the subsidies, the favoritism, the corrupt monetary policies, the fascist protection of the big oligarchies, and not allowing competition to these people. That is what's creating inflation in a lot of the areas. Just look at college loans. College loans, remember in 2009, which I don't think Maxine Waters knew about when she was asked this question, if we all recall, the government took over student loans. Well, what happened? They started to falsely manufacture the perception and said, everybody deserves college. It's everybody's dream. It's not everybody's dream. It's not for everybody. And 90% of the college degrees are totally worthless. So what happened when people started going to colleges? Rates went up. Well, now what happens if 90% of the degrees are worthless? If rates go up, how are these young people going to pay those college loans back? Basically, what they're doing is deferring time leverage because of those loans, so they have to be a renter so they're wasting time for building equity and putting money into principal. So the time leverage as a young person, they're really missing out on. And this is why we have to go back to a lot of these definitions. These definitions, economics is now propaganda. It's not math anymore. I mean, what do earnings mean? What does prices mean? What does leverage mean? Fair value, fundamentals, markets, free markets, liquidity, solvency, inflation, deflation, GDP, credit, debt, core businesses of corporations, supply and demand, velocity of money. We've not only gotten away from core business, we've gotten away from reality. When you go away from reality and you manufacture perception, you can't have commerce. And that's what's happening. Trump inherited this. That's why he's doing this tariff thing, because he wants to bring manufacturing back. He wants to penalize companies for being abroad. Who knows if this is going to work? But he inherited a disaster. And I'm just saying, if we're going to be going, Vince, you've heard me talk about this for years now. If we're going to be going into negative rates, can we please help the little people and give a light at the end of the tunnel program, eliminate interest, and if we get deep into negative, literally, instead of saving the banks all the time, instead of saving Wall Street all the time, instead of saving the wealthiest people like Warren Buffett with bailouts and all these other companies, insurance companies, solar companies, this company, that company, auto companies, can we please give a little QE to the people? If we go to negative interest rates, let's say we're at negative 3% on the long end of the yield, and everybody's borrowing on the long end so they have more time to pay it off. Keep in mind, for all of you who are saying this isn't free markets, this isn't supply and demand, this isn't capitalism, we haven't had this for years. Please look in your economic books and look up quantitative easing for me. Please look at stock buybacks. I've given so many examples over the years of all the corruption, the group identity politics, and now that we're being inundated with robotics and automation and censorship and surveillance with AI, the people are losing. The people are losing. So I'm just saying, if we go into negative rates, I feel equities, I feel especially home ownership will increase. Now, we have to do it in a way where people have to pay back their existing loans first, but if they get money back at the end of that fiscal year, let's say we're in 3% negative on the long end and people are buying on the long end, so they have more time to pay back their loans, okay? Negative interest rates are a fee. They're not good. They're not good for savers. But for the little guy, and we have to have the fees and the penalties should only be for people of high net worth. The people are going to have to decide who pays those fees. If you have under $1 million net worth, I'm shooting from the hip here. Okay, you should not have to, and that's the means testing part of it. You should not have to pay those fees. But all these people who call themselves philanthropists, well, we should have laws of excess. What they're doing is they're putting that excess net worth into buying treason and sedition and espionage and pedophilia. I don't give a damn who has sex with anybody. I don't give a damn as long as it's adult mutual consensual sex. That's not asking much. Just a few words, adult mutual consensual sex. You know, when a little kid goes through this, they stand no chance of a normal life, none. So anyway, pardon my digression there. If we dismantle central banks, dismantle debt-based currency, we need to audit the Fed. All this talk about class envy is the biggest bunch of BS I've ever heard, because the wealthy are funding both sides of the wars. They're funding NGOs. They're funding geoengineering. They're funding everything that makes us sick. And speaking of sick, GDP, 20 to 25% of GDP is about people being sick, going to hospitals, going to doctors, paying prescription drugs. That's not benevolent. The problem is the little people doesn't get the microphone. And the bigger problem than that is the little people has no representation. The little people has no restitution under the law, no rights under the law. And that's why the powers that be are dividing us with skin pigmentation, with gender, with sexual orientation. We have to draw our own line in the sand, and we have to start sticking together and holding our own narrative, meme, talking point, and theme party. We can't allow the powers that be to sway public opinion, especially through division. Divide and conquer strategies don't work. When you insult people and say that they can't compete, that their work is suboptimal, like Ilan Omar did a few weeks ago, saying that Latinos can't compete in a merit-based system. Tell me how that's not division. It insults someone's work ethic, ability, and intelligence. It degrades and disrespects the people. You never empower a group, an individual, or a nation by lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job. Everything is made to make you be submissive, to break your will, to keep your mouth shut. We can't allow that, because then freedom, liberty, everything, principle, opportunity, everything will go. When you lower the bars of standards and expectations for opportunity and jobs, you destroy America. You're rewarding mediocrity. You're eliminating anybody who's in a certain group to have ingenuity, productivity, and innovation and knowledge. We can't allow these politically correct buzzwords like racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorists to be touted by the mainstream media and the powers that be, who are bought and paid for, who are funded by the elite, to use these words every second of the day. These words don't even mean anything anymore. We have unsustainable headwinds in this economy. Our future rates of growth is looking bleak. I'm just hoping that we can stay out of a recession, at least with today's numbers and unit of measures and calculations, before the November election. I think that President Trump is trying to get through there to change the economic system. And I've spent hours on the air talking about central bank corrupt monetary policies, Keynesian economics, group identity politics, and demographics. I've talked about how the game is rigged till I'm blue in the face. And when you look at the numbers, folks, the little guy's losing ground. The bottom 93% is giving up. That's why you have units of measure going through the roof. The despair is going through the roof. Drug use, alcoholism, obesity. I mean, people. Vince, I've got articles here. We should go. I should just touch on the. And I know Margaret's waiting, so I'm going to save those for another day, probably. But there's articles here that you wouldn't even believe we're living in the United States of America. It sounds like a Twilight Zone episode. And we need to get back to normalcy. Not normalcy bias, but we just need to raise the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job, not based on what group you're in, but based on standards, based on fair value, based on free markets and supply and demand. Because people don't even know where to invest. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do for an occupation. People are afraid to say anything because of political correctness. So, that being said, thank you all for listening to my rant.
Rich,
and you did something at a different time. But
Rich,
Margaret,
you did something.
if you're on the phone, please feel free to chime in.
Margaret had to go, but she left her phone number for me.
Okay.
But, Rich, you did something that has never been done before. I think our engineer was so engrossed with what you're saying, he eliminated the bottom of the hour news and commercial announcements, and you went right through it. Never happened before.
Well, I'll have to send him a check.
Now, I've got a couple comments about what you said. I'd like to tie it together. During hour number one, the topic of Donald Trump's tax return was mentioned. You mentioned that, I believe. And I believe that you were saying to the effect that, if you have the tax information, you can see the business relationships of the person who filed the tax return. You can figure out where money came in and where money came out. You can follow the money trail. Well, that's absolutely true. And I think you're absolutely right. So the other team wants to know, who are our associates? And how can they find out? It's easy. So who looks at your Facebook account? Who chimes in? Who posts? What do you have to say? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? That's on Facebook. Then there's Alignable. Who are your business associates? Who wants to be associated with you through Alignable, another social media networking platform, company? And then there's LinkedIn. Who else do you associate with? So if you look at Facebook, Alignable, and LinkedIn, just to name three, there's a great amount of information as to who your associates are, what you do, where you spend your time, who your commerce involves. Okay? Now, there's to further tie this together. Now, of course, I don't have Facebook, and I'm really trying to dump Alignable, and it's hard to shut those guys down. They won't let me go. So I have to spend more time to figure out how to get rid of them. And Skype. Now, I did dump my Skype account where I can make phone calls. I did that, and that was hard. I had to look up, how do you get rid of Skype? It's hard, but I did it. And I'm talking about the Skype to phone account, the $2.99 plus tax per month account. Well, that's now gone. So about how free are we with our information? Canadian Broadcasting Company did a special report. And I paid attention to this report. So they created a special app for smartphones. And it was, you can get your daily horoscope for free. So they created this app. And then they had this gal on the street, and she was saying, hey, you can sign up for this app, and all you have to do is download it, and the terms and conditions are right there. And all these really bright millennials were looking at it, and they were reading through the terms and conditions. And she, the person on camera for Marketplace, the Canadian Broadcasting Company Marketplace, was saying to them, you're reading through, oh yeah, I can read, I can speed read, I'm reading through the terms and conditions. So you can, all these terms and conditions, oh yeah, I'm reading through them, it's good. So they click OK, and now they've got the app. And in the terms and conditions, it says, we have the right, now I'm paraphrasing, to access your contacts, your pictures, your text, your tweets, your emails, your voice, your video, and we can listen in on your microphone. Click OK. And they all clicked OK. And then they were horrified to find out to what they agreed. They agreed to let this app. So what they did what we did in their way. We did a broadcast, several of them, actually 3 of them, and we called it Doublespeak. We literally spent hours on the radio speaking absolute nonsense, and they were some of our highest ranked broadcasts. Doublespeak, pure scientific nonsense. Nonsense. Not even sentences that made sense, but they sounded real. And with Rick Miller. People loved it. They loved our nonsense. So we did it that way, and the Canadian Broadcasting Company did a special report on people aren't paying attention. Exactly what we did. We did it by doublespeak, saying people aren't paying attention, and we proved it, and they did it too, and they proved it, because people don't read the terms and conditions. So, to put the exclamation point on what you said, Rich Scheben, is Facebook, Alignable, LinkedIn, all of those social media platforms and more, and these apps are spying on you, and you're letting them. And what do they want to know? They want to know who you associate with. Who are your contacts? What do you have in common? And if they want to audit you and give this information to the IRS, the ABC, the DEFG, HIJK, LMNOP, those guys, they've got it. And where'd they get it? You gave it to them. And you said they can share it. And they do. So you've opened up your lives. Dump Facebook, Alignable, LinkedIn, and all the rest of it. Dump it. You do not need it. Why would you do that? Why would you give that information to people whom you don't know, who can use it against you? Why? Makes no sense to me.
Hey, Vince, I got to chime in here. You know, you look at even the divorce rates skyrocketing in America for people 50 and over. You don't think that the powers that be are trying to create division? They need distractions, okay? I'm reading articles where up to 25% of millennials are lonely. I don't think I've ever had a lonely day in my life with the chores, with the hunting and fishing, with living off grid, with nature. If you don't want to be lonely, folks, live off grid, write a book. I guarantee you're not going to be lonely, because people are going to be knocking down your door. trying to glean information from you. But if you live in nature, you live in the natural world, if you read, if you research, if you help others, the people who don't are the people more susceptible to gossip, to rumors, to putting down other people to justify their lives. And if you stand for principle, and pardon my repetition on this, but there's 3 criteria, very simple. First of all, the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second criteria is truth. And the third is, if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, then you get to do it too. And then that's when we implement practice what you preach laws. Because most of these people are not practicing what they preach. Listen, I try hard not to judge others. I try hard not to, I don't care if someone wants to do things behind closed doors, as long as it's not violence against other people, go for it, okay? If you want to ruin your life, you go for it, okay? If you're an adventure junkie or an adrenaline junkie, and you want to, parachute off tall buildings, go for it. But don't shove your lifestyle down other people's throats and make them do the same thing that you're doing. And it's just that simple. Well, folks, we'll be back right after the break.
Yeah.
Looks like we couldn't
and I've got a comment.
Canceling this break.
Yeah, well, he's going to make us take this one. But I've got a comment about what you said about gossip. You're absolutely right on the money. Rich Scheben and I will be right back. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com, and you can buy his book on Amazon. And the book is called One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. Rich Scheben, when I worked for industry, and when I worked for manufacturing industry as well as banking, I remember walking down hallways, being in elevators with coworkers, and even at lunch, and we talked about making better what we were doing. We talked shop all the time. We talked shop about how to make the customer's experience better, how to make our programs better, how to make our offerings better, what we could do as a department, and how we could work better with other departments. It was always doing a better job at what we did. But I've been in government buildings where I've just been in an elevator, and I hear other government workers talking to each other, and I'm talking about local, county, city-type government employees, and they don't talk about that. They talk about who's got the best donuts, they talk about where to get the hamburgers, and they talk about each other. That's what they talk about. Little petty stuff. Gossip, gossip, gossip. It's absolutely the truth of the matter. And you can find it out for yourself, class. Just pay attention when you go in those government buildings. You can tell who they are. They dress differently, they act differently, and they talk about petty things. Robert in Kansas, welcome. You're on with Rich Scheben.
Thank you, Vincent. I think if we made money gold again, that it would really fix a lot of things. I do have a question for Rich Scheben, and that would be, Rich, have you ever looked into the flat earth theory?
When you say that, give me a little more information of context, because I'm just assuming that you're saying, if you're part of that flat earth club, that the earth is flat and not round. Is that your message?
Well, I was just curious because people are saying that it is flat, and then when you go out and you do the research on a 25,000 miles, circumference Earth, you don't really get the results that you would expect. And so I was wondering up there in Montana, in a beautiful place you're in, if you've ever looked into that idea or thought that, obviously the initial reaction is to think these people are crazy. But have you ever looked into that, Rich? Because it does, when you do look into it, it doesn't seem to, conform to what you're taught in school, let's say.
Well, until you look into things like the rule of laws of gravity, when you look at the fact that you can only see 20 miles out in the sea because the Earth is round. When you look at the rotation, when you look at the solar system, the galaxies, and the stars moving, I think there's plenty of evidence, especially from satellites in space, that shows that we're obviously around Earth as all the planets in our solar system. However, there may be more context about the flat Earth theory in relevant to certain debates and information that's not going to do certain people much good. So that's why when I say the term context, I always like to find out, because, one thing, Robert, whether it be an answer or a question, the context of it can be changed sometimes in one word, in one sentence. And it all depends on what the end result is and what the conclusion is. Like I mentioned earlier, the powers that be often want to create a conclusion, and then they manufacture the narrative around it. So I don't know what else to say besides what I did say just now.
I've got a question. So we all know that a sphere is the strongest shape known to man. So if the Earth were flat, wouldn't it crack? Robert?
Oh, Vincent, I don't know anything. I just know that the moon landing is very suspect. 50 years
absolutely.
later, there would be something up there. There would be a military base or a mining operation or something up there, maybe even tourism at this point, if we had actually landed on the moon. I'm a military guy. I'm a warfare guy. And they talk about a position to have, right, up on the moon. And so I know that there would be something up there if you could land on the moon. And I figure if these people are lying about that, they're probably lying about a lot of other things. And I just did my own research. I got a telescope. I got a nice camera that zooms in. And I tell you what, 20 miles is nothing. You can see 60, 100 miles. You can see lighthouses from 300 miles away. There are situations where it is impossible that you are actually on the spherical Earth that they tell us we're on. But, at the same time, it's probably the most threatening sort of thing you can say to somebody in terms of what their psyche has developed around, because, we're taught the things we're taught, and if you start going outside of that and you say that space is different and the Earth is different and all that stuff, people become very upset. So I don't mean to do that, but it's just something to look into, Rich, because it just doesn't go away when you look into it.
Robert, just one quick comment. If the Earth were flat, we wouldn't need to have tall towers for transmission, because the tall towers overcome the curvature of the Earth. It's as simple as that, because many radio waves only travel in a straight line. And if the Earth were flat, we wouldn't need radio transmission or television transmission towers. Robert in Kansas, thank you so much for being with us. Rich Scheben, thank you so much for being with us. And class, we'll see you tomorrow.